welcome back to Uncle John's Gun Masterclass. Today we're looking at the venerable 1911 semi-automatic pistol, and we are looking at how to clean the thing. So here is the weapon on the table with the cleaning tool that is usually supplied with it. And you really do need this because some of the spring pressures in here are really quite something to deal with, and you need the appropriate tool. So the first thing to do when picking up a weapon is to make sure that it's safe. So we can see the hammer is back and the safety is off. So the first thing we need to do is put the safety on. Next thing is to make sure that the magazine well is empty. And this version of the 1911 by Smith & Wesson has a little witness hole there so that it's possible to see if there's a round in the chamber or not. Personally, I don't find it very reliable because unless the light is ideal, it's difficult to see. Now, if your life depended on it, would you be able to tell whether there was a round in the chamber or not? I would submit probably not. So what we need to do is this. We need to unload the gun in a professional way, and we do that by taking the safety off, gripping the gun conventionally with our finger, our trigger finger, off the trigger and on the trigger guard, and then racking the slide back, and any round that in the chamber would have dropped into my hand. Let's fix the slide open this time and manually inspect. As we saw on an earlier video when we were unloading the gun with the gun oriented this way so that we could see the action of the ejector, if there's a round in the chamber, it pops out this way. Sometimes it falls down inside the magazine well, which isn't very helpful, which is why doing it this way, cupping one's hand over the ejector port, is by far the more professional way, because that way the round ends up sitting in the palm of one's hand, as it were. So there we are, we have a safe gun, it's unloaded, it's now safe to proceed. So what do we do? The first thing we do is to close the slide and then stand the gun vertically on end like that, and you will see this rather interesting concoction here. There's the barrel. There's the crown of the barrel. Incidentally, it's important that you don't let anything harder than the barrel contact the crown of the barrel. The crown of the barrel is the last thing the bullet sees, or feels rather, as it ejects the barrel, and any damage to the barrel crown can cause accuracy issues. On some handguns they have a recessed crown, so after machining the rifling and so on, they carefully recess the crown back a little way so that inadvertent impact on the crown will not damage, on the end of the barrel rather, will not damage the crown. That is the end of the rifling, the end of the innermost part of the barrel. So let's begin to disassemble the weapon. First of all, this thing here, this piece of metal here, is called the barrel bush. Let's get something to point here. That's called the barrel bushing. This thing here is the recoil spring and guide rod. It sits in its own little bushing there. The intricacy with which this little beastie is made is something to behold, actually. So how do we dismantle it? Now, spring pressures are high, remember, so you should wear goggles and so on. The first thing is to put this device over the muzzle of the gun, like this, and turn the barrel bush to the right. And at that point, the guide rod and the guide rod bush comes out and can be withdrawn completely. Let's put that there so it remains visible. That's the guide rod. I don't know if you've noticed, but the recoil spring is not the same at both ends. This end is closed. This end is open. You see it's got an open helix there. the open part of the spring goes to the front of the gun, goes to the muzzle end. So we'll keep this oriented in the right way as we intend to reassemble the gun. So you see, looking at the barrel bushing again, see I rotated it to the right, and now I rotate it to the left. And at that point it can be withdrawn. Masterful engineering. Look at the way that's being machined there. There are corresponding machinings in the slide. It's quite a wonderfully built gun. So now, how do we get the slide off? The hammer is already back, and we know because we've already checked that the gun is safe. We don't do that because I moved the slide forward again, but I moved it forward so that I could show you the takedown notch. Do you see that little indentation in the, let's zoom the camera forward here, zoom the camera in so that you guys can see this. Let's hope it can focus there. There's a little notch in the skirt of the slide. We want to align that with the takedown pin, which is this mechanism here. So for that to happen, we need to move the slide backwards. And this is what would happen when the gun is cycling anyway, although it would move further back than that. And with the takedown notch in the right position, we then push on the other side of the gun. There's the takedown pin there, which we push through with our finger there, and you see it moved very easily because we've already taken the recoil spring out from the front. There is no lateral pressure on the slide at this point, and so we can remove the takedown pin. This is actually the barrel link pin as well, and we will see on the barrel there is a link which is just like the link in a bicycle chain, and it's about the same strength as well. And we can see from the appearance of the takedown pin that the gun has been cleaned since it was last fired. So let's zoom out again. You see there's a nice smidge of oil there that was behind the takedown pin. And now what we're going to do is slide the barrel forward, the slide off the receiver, thus. So let's put the slide to one side for a moment. Let's have a look at the receiver. The first thing to note on the 1911 is the feed ramp. This design of gun has a very long feed ramp, and it continues on the barrel, and we'll look at it in a moment. And I think this is why sometimes the 1911 is prone to hanging up when firing, because the feed mechanism isn't as elegant as on some other weapons. And so with the 1911 one has to alight on a choice of ammunition which suits one's gun. I'm just wiping the excess oil off there like that. As with previous videos, we don't want the hammer to be back there where it can fall forward if the trigger is pulled. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grip the hammer, pull the trigger, and have it fall under full control. I'll explain why. Let me take it back again. This is where the hammer is meant to strike the firing pin, and in fact you can see some wear marks there. Because of mechanical advantage, if the bottom of the hammer contacts the frame here, potentially it's going to do a lot of damage. The hammer is quite heavy, It's under a lot of pressure from the mainspring, which is inside the rear of the grip here. And when handling a gun with the slide removed, I think it's good practice to lower the hammer gracefully like that so that no damage can be caused. Again, we want to be as professional as possible in the way that we handle our weapons, because we want our weapons to give us many years of useful service, enjoyment, sporting, shooting, and so on. So here's the receiver. You can see this gun has been used quite a lot. The paint has worn off, and there underneath is the scandium frame. This is a scandium framed pistol. It's quite light and strong. But having said the paint has worn off, there's nothing really of any concern there for us right now. So let's move on to the slide. This is the recoil spring guide rod. One of the things you'll notice on it is a little shaped washer here. And this, let me take the barrel. Oh, this is interesting. You'll like the way the barrel comes out. The barrel comes out the front, ladies and gentlemen. Only John Moses Browning could have invented this. A very elegant design. There's the barrel link there, and that engages in the takedown pin, as we saw. There's the feed ramp. So if we look at this now, do you see how the feed ramp is a two-part feed ramp? There's the barrel, there's the receiver, and there's a little junction there between receiver and barrel. And in my humble opinion, this is not absolutely ideal. It's necessary for the design of the gun, the way the gun works, but that could give rise to jams and things like that. So one has to be aware of that and choose ammunition appropriately. I sometimes use this with pest load, so-called birdshot. It turns the gun into a small shotgun, and it works very well. Those cartridges are not shaped like conventional rounds, and so they are prone to hanging when they're introduced into the chamber. They just get stuck, and you need to manipulate the slide a little bit to get it in. But if you're only after a rabbit or something, it's not too much of a hassle, but it certainly wouldn't be good for a personal defense situation. So there is the barrel. In cleaning the barrel, we need to make sure, of course, there's no debris on the outside. We also need to make sure there's no debris on the inside, and we do that by looking through the barrel, checking the rifling for coppering, or if we've used leaded bullets, any leading. It's important when using lead bullets to thoroughly de-lead the barrel before using full metal jacketed rounds, because the lead can dramatically increase the pressure in the barrel if one is not careful, and can, in exceptional circumstances, cause the barrel to split, which is a very dangerous situation for all sorts of reasons. So you really want to be very careful of that. Now, the first thing to do when we clean the barrel is to take a cotton patch and add it to our trusty pistol cleaning rod, which is here. Oops. And then we add some oil to this. What we're doing is we're just coating the inside of the barrel with a light film of oil. because this is a larger barrel in diameter, it's easier to clean than smaller handguns. But the quid pro quo is it's more expensive to run because the ammunition is more expensive. But the quid pro quo again is that in a defensive situation you would really want a 45 with you, because the 45 has the stopping power of a very heavy round. It's also a remarkably easy gun to aim and shoot well. There, for example, is what the bullet would look like in the weapon, if it were possible to see it with the weapon assembled. So the business end of the barrel, let's put the bullet safely to one side. This is a 4-inch barrel, which is shorter than some 1911s which have a 5-inch barrel, so this is slightly less accurate than the 5-inch, but still pretty accurate. The 45 ACP wasn't designed for use at long distances anyway. So, moving on to cleaning, we've got to make sure that the chamber is clean of crud. And again, this gun was cleaned already since being fired, so in that sense it's not absolutely ideal, but because it's clean we can see how clean it should be, if you know what I mean. So there is the barrel, there is the slide. Points of contact between the slide and the receiver are quite easy to understand on this design of gun, because we can see very clearly what the slide runs on. It runs on these rails. There's a flange, effectively there's a flange above and below, and so what we need to do is make sure that there is oil on the bottom surface of the rail, the side and the top. And we can do that by simply introducing oil into the grooves that have been very carefully machined at very great expense by Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson into this fine firearm. A drop of oil fore and aft and spread along is sufficient, because on insertion of the receiver into the slide, that will be spread where it needs to be spread. Again there, fore and aft, and moved along there. We need to make sure there's some oil here, because as one can see on this, there are some wear marks here. There is a part that rubs along here, and it could be seen thus. That's that little thing there sticking out, and that rubs on the underneath of the slide, and if that isn't lubricated, then wear very quickly develops on that. So there's the slide clean. The breech face needs to be checked. See the firing pin hole there. We need to make sure that that's clean of crud, debris, any foreign matter, particularly if the gun has been used in windy conditions outside. All sorts of things get drawn into the gun. And the extractor, we can see the extractor here actually. Let's try and throw some light quite literally on that, and it's that little, let's try and get the gun oriented so that we can see that there. And if I zoom in, if I put my finger behind it, there you can see the ejector quite clearly there. It's just that little triangle of metal there. So upon that relies the whole operation of the gun. So let's zoom out again. PD, by the way, in the nomenclature of Smith & Wesson stands for personal defence, and this is an excellent personal defence weapon. It's not the lightest of carry guns, but it can be carried very well in the appropriate holster. and with the right clothing can be fully concealed for concealed carry where legal. So we will now begin to reassemble the weapon. These notches here engage with corresponding notches in the slide, and so we need to put a drop of oil on them because the operation of the slide is violent, and we want these parts to survive for a very long time, and the only way to do that is to ensure appropriate and adequate lubrication. So we put, whoops, sorry, doing it the wrong way. See, Mr. Moses Browning knew all about this before I did. So we've introduced the barrel correctly through the front of the slide. Let's do that again because it's quite unique. Here we are. And you see how well this is being designed now, because look, we drop the barrel in that way, and just as on another gun we were looking at earlier, we push that back and it clicks into place. And it's that lock up there between the corresponding parts on the barrel and the slide causes the barrel to be dragged back with the slide on recoil. So let's put that down, and the next thing is to introduce the guide rod here, and where that washer, which wears out over time and sometimes needs to be replaced, where that washer and guide piece sit on the top of the chamber, or the bottom of the chamber as it were, because the gun is now upside down, that needs to be lubricated. And now these parts are loose on here, so we have to hold them in place whilst we turn them over, making sure that the barrel link falls down, and the barrel link just needs a drop of oil on it. Again, when the gun is working, these parts are thrashing around with reasonably loose tolerances so that the gun is reliable even under dirty conditions. And so the design of any mechanism is a compromise, and what we want to see is reliability and longevity, and so the manufacturing tolerances of these parts is a compromise between those two demands. Okay, so now we come to the part where we reassemble the slide and the receiver, and we do it this way. We offer the receiver up to the slide, slide them back like that, make sure that little part is down, and we slide it back like that. Now we have to make sure that the takedown notch there is aligned as before. Do you see it just on the skirt of the slide? And we insert the takedown pin, and if all is well, that will seat immediately. There's a little spring device there that serves to provide the spring détente for the takedown pin and the slide release, which is this fellow here, and also the beaver tail safety here. And you see it runs from the front of the grip to the back, and that provides the spring détente, i.e. positioning and retention of position for those two mechanisms. So now we move the slide forward again, and we're now in a position to commence the reassembly of the front of the gun. Now the first thing to go back is the barrel bushing, and do you remember when we disassembled the gun we went right and then left? So right now we start off left, and then we turn that around like that, and now we insert the recoil spring. Do you remember the closed end goes to the back, the open end of the helix goes to the front, and we just drop a little bit of oil on that to find its way along the spring all the way along the guide rod, and then we insert the recoil spring bushing. And at that point we resort to the Smith & Wesson tool, and it's tricky because you're pushing down against a not inconsiderable spring pressure, and you have to get the bush aligned like that. So what I did there, it was all concealed. The bush was here. I pressed down on the spring there and then turns the bush around so that this surface locks on the recoil spring bush there. And what we do now is we just put a tiniest drop of oil on the barrel bushing on both sides, and likewise the recoil spring bushing. And that's it. And then we wipe away any excess oil, and there we have one clean and serviceable 1911 semi-automatic pistol. This pistol is really the creme de la creme of firearms. It embodies so much in terms of tactical usefulness. The ergonomics, the way it works, means that if you were in a situation where you needed a weapon, this would be the go-to weapon for a medium distance encounter. It's reliable. If you have a failure to fire, it's possible to do a double tap simply by cocking the hammer again. It's a very powerful weapon, and the sight picture is very conventional. Shot placement is easy. The real difficulty for a weapon like this, especially with a beginner, is flinch. Because the recoil on this weapon is significant, people flinch when they fire it. The way to fire a weapon like this, any weapon, is to pull the trigger slowly, continuously, and so that the release of the hammer is a surprise. If you do that, there is no flinch, because one is not expecting the flinch, because one cannot expect the flinch, because one does not know when it will occur. Ladies and gentlemen, the 1911 semi-automatic pistol. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.